And for the sake of time, I'm going to abbreviate this introduction here. Alyssa Miller, Business Information Security Officer for S&P Global, a lifelong hacker. Alyssa's passionate about technology and security. She bought her first computer at age 12 with money she earned on her paper route, I might add, and quickly learned the techniques for hacking modern communications and software. She began as a software developer, pivoted to information security roles. Beginning as an application pen tester, Alyssa Miller has since grown as a security leader with experience across a variety of organizations, regularly advocates for improved security practices, and shares her research with business leaders and industry audiences not gauged in research and advocacy. She's also an accomplished soccer referee, guitarist, and photographer. Everyone, I'd like to extend a warm welcome from the Information Security Summit to Alyssa Miller.
Information Security Summit. Here we are. It's 2021, and there's a room full of people here. Like I could come out there. I could touch you with consent, of course. We're here. Welcome. This is exciting. I'm actually thrilled to be standing on a stage in front of a bunch of people because this is only just starting to happen again. This is great. So this has been a crazy couple years. But here we are. We're talking security. We're talking all about the things that we do within our business. We heard great stories in the last half hour about all sorts of ransomware and how that's dominating the scene when it comes to news about cybersecurity in particular. And security, more than ever, I think we're starting to realize how much a part of the business we really are. How many of you have kids? Show of hands if you are willing to admit. Some of you, your kids are probably getting to that point where maybe they want to drive. Yeah, you've been hearing that already. I heard high school kids, so yes. So my kid comes to me with this picture. Hey, I found a car. It's only $7,000, Can I get this car? 2007 Mustang GT. Yeah, kid, I don't know, man. I get why you want this car, but I don't know that a first car, that's what I want. So how excited do you think he was when I told him, this is the car you're getting? You were asking before, you guys went there with this metaphor, what's the equivalent of the K car? How about a 2007 Camry LE? Yes! That was exciting stuff. But what do we do when we think about that with our executives for a minute? When we as security, we come to them and we say, they're saying, hey, we want to go as fast as we can. You guys were talking about developers before and how developers want to do everything as quickly as they can. And we say, no, you've got to ride in the Camry because that's the one that's safe. How excited do you think they get when we say that? You think that encourages them to come to us with their ideas? Probably not. What if we did something like this? So, full disclosure, this is my car. My son doesn't drive this car. One time. But why do I put this car up there? It's a BMW 340i with the M Performance package. This sucker's quick. It'll spank the doors right off of that Mustang I just had up there. It's fast. It's fun. but it's also the IIHS top safety pick from 2017. So it's fast, but it's secure. Isn't that what we're there to do? You know, a colleague of mine uses this a story or metaphor or whatever, that we're like the brakes on a car. The brakes on a car are not there to make sure that the car, or to stop the car. They're to make sure that the car can go as fast as possible, but do it safely. That's the purpose of brakes. We in security have to think the same way. Now, the encouraging thing is I'm starting to see this more and more from our executives, where I'm seeing articles like this. I'm talking to executives, and they're saying, yeah, you know, as security, I'm there to enable the business. I talk to CISOs who say that all the time. Sounds wonderful. Yes, yes, we in security, we're going to make the business better. We're going to enable the business. And then I ask them, what does that mean? And the glassy look comes over their eyes, and they start trying to mumble through it, and risk, blah, 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 whatever, blah, blah, blah. Do you think your executives want to hear about risk management? Sure, they do, in some respects. But is that the thing that's going to excite them? Is that the thing that's going to engage them with security and make them want to work with you? We need to change this conversation completely. Get away from this idea of security is there just to minimize risk. That's this ethereal thing. We tell all these stories of these horrible attacks that are going to happen, and they're in the news, and okay, great. But as you guys pointed out this morning, how often do they really take that seriously? Oh, our weather station's not a target for ransomware. Yeah, now you're using flip charts. Yeah, if you all weren't here for that, you missed that story. That's an awesome one. But that's the reality of what's going on. And we keep fighting for that seat at the table, and we keep having trouble getting there because when we go in there, we talk about risk, and we talk about all these horrible technological things that are going to happen, and oh my God, and we're not the people they want to hear from. So my progression's been kind of interesting. Now, I've been a hacker all my life. You know, you heard the story. At 12 years old, I bought my first computer. What he didn't tell you is I broke into Prodigy. Yeah. I hear the laughs from the people who actually remember what Prodigy was. Yes, there are people out there who know what I'm talking about. But I've been through, you know, I was a programmer for 10 years. I've been in security the last 16. But, you know, I've been slowly elevating into the conversations at executive levels. And so when I worked for a reseller, those conversations, I was really focused on, okay, how do we just justify our security expenditures? And so I started thinking of, you know, okay, let's talk about this. How do we generate some excitement? Then I started working for a cloud-native security vendor. They create SCA, software composition analysis. So when we're hearing about NPM packages that are, you know, containing crypto miners, hey, if you're running SCA, maybe you catch that stuff. But then so that got me into this conversation about DevOps and DevSecOps, and how do we become a part of that conversation as security leaders? How do we get into that? Because yes, developers and engineers, man, they ran off and they were gonna, hey, how are we gonna work together and deploy faster? And security was left out of that conversation because they didn't want us there. Because we were gonna put the brakes on. We were gonna stick them back in the Camry, and they wanted the Mustang. But now I'm the BISO for S&P Global Ratings, a $4 billion a year revenue division of S&P Global. We do credit ratings for enterprise organizations, sovereign nations. So imagine what's going on there. And yet we've gone through this massive cloud transformation. We're not your old typical, you know, financial services, super conservative, you know, we just stick to mainframes kind of company. You know what I'm talking, you've been there, come on. Would it shock you if I told you we're 100% cloud? And that 75% of that is cloud native? Sure, there was some lift and shift into EC2, but you know, no, we're in the cloud 100%. We're not doing mainframes. So I started to see all the pieces of the puzzle start to come together, and I realized this is where we need to start to change this conversation. Anybody familiar with RACI matrix? How about this one for a minute? Now, when we talk DevOps, what is one of the terms that comes up? It's that shared responsibility. So what did security do when we heard that term? Well, we bastardized the hell out of it. We said security is everybody's job. Okay, great, yes. But if I'm going to tell my developers and I'm going to tell my SREs, hey, you have to be accountable for application security, I don't get to do that in security unless I am going to take on accountability for that pipeline, making sure that it's effective and that it's efficient. I need to, as a security professional, take on accountability for production stability. We can't abdicate our responsibilities there while saying, hey, developers, hey, SREs, you're responsible for making sure the world's secure. That's arrogant. We don't have that right. We're guests in their world, like it or not. That's the way this works. They make the money. You know the story. When it's the business versus security, who wins? The business every single time. And there's a reason for that, because they make money. Unless you're working in a consulting agency, we in security, we don't make money. So how do we start to tie ourselves to revenue? And how do we start to make this a reality? I'm a firm believer in the role that I'm standing in today. The Business Information Security Officer. I drive the security strategy for our entire division. We have 4 divisions at S&P. Each one has a BISO. Well, save for one that hasn't quite gotten there yet, but we'll leave them out of it for now. But what is a Business Information Security Officer really all about? Do you recognize this? Does this look familiar to you? We've got our business lines, we've got our security teams, and in the middle, that great divide, that canyon that we always seem to struggle to cross. How do we bring ourselves into those conversations? We fight hard. We create different, architecture review policies and policies for doing vulnerability management and put all these requirements out there, and that's going to get us into the conversations. No, it gets us maybe a few minutes of communication because now they know they have to do this if they want to deploy. So what the BISO does is the BISO stands as this bridge. I'm that bridge between the business line and the security teams. And the thing about this bridge, it goes both ways. I'm bringing business context to the security team as much as I'm bringing security context down into the business. And that's where this role excels. So I'm advocating for the business line, or security within the business line. That's the DevSecOps message, right? How do I get security into my DevSecOps pipeline in a meaningful way? A way that's going to gain adoption. A way that is, here's that buzzword, frictionless. Have we heard that one? Woo, yeah, right? I mean, we talk about it, it's a great idea, but how often does it happen? And can it happen? Maybe we're always going to introduce a little bit of friction, but we can make that our goal. And it needs to be our goal because that's how we get the business line to accept what it is we want to do. But, and I tell this story, this is interesting. So I took on this role, and coming into the role, the job description talked about creating a security-first culture, yada, yada, okay. So my assumption was, all right, I'm going to be, working to really advocate for security practices inside this particular division. And I thought that'd be the bulk of my job. The reality is, advocating on behalf of the business back to security has been 65 to 70% of what I do on a daily basis. I have had epic arguments with the people in my information security team about why the things that they're trying to do are not going to be accepted by the business and how we need to better align what it is that they're doing. I mentioned that we're 100% cloud. We are going with a formal multi-cloud strategy. And I don't just mean, we have multiple vendors. I mean, we're looking at how do we run active-active? How can I flop a particular application from one cloud provider to another simply because either that one cloud went unavailable or because this other cloud provider is cheaper for that type of service? That's what we're doing. Think about the security challenges involved in that, though. When I want tooling that works across all of that. We're deep into AI ML, and I'm not talking about just, buzzword bingo out here with, pardon me, vendors, I love you to death, but I'm talking about using AI in meaningful ways to create credit ratings. Well, what happens when I do that is, because of regulations, I have to be able to explain every decision my AI makes. I can't have an AI that generates a bunch of pictures of Barack Obama with white skin and say, well, I don't know why that happened. No, we have to be able to say, this is why our AI worked and made this particular decision. And you'll love this one. Brace yourselves. We're using blockchain in a way that actually is meaningful for something other than cryptocurrency. No. I kid you not. Really, seriously. So using blockchain to handle things like file integrity. And we're talking about is that the drinking game today? Every time we mention blockchain, so if I just keep saying blockchain, you all be drunk before lunch. Awesome. But no, so these are challenging technologies, and if I don't align my security team to what we're doing, this is where we'll fail. Or more importantly, this is where my product teams are going to go off and do their own thing because security is not there ready at the table to help support them. So what is a BISO actually responsible for? Well, in my organization, and honestly, from having talked with other BISOs who I know in various organizations, this is kind of the four main areas that it falls into. And I'm not a huge fan of magic quadrants, but this isn't the last time you're going to see it. Lower left, vulnerability management. That's it day-to-day. We're just keeping the lights on. We're finding our vulnerabilities. We're fixing our vulnerabilities. Lower right, governance, risk, compliance. I work for a credit rating agency that's global. I have 35 different regulating bodies that I have to meet with on a regular basis and give them updates on what it is that we're doing. I have to meet all of their requirements. And trust me, they're not all in sync. So that's fun. Upper left, application product security. Well, now we're getting a little more proactive. But what's most important to me right now is that security strategy and that roadmap. What are we actually doing to get continuously better day over day? What are we driving toward from a business to try to get more secure? So with that, thinking about what are the qualities of a good BISO? First of all, the obvious. We do need somebody who's well-versed in security concepts, right? Now, I'm not saying everybody's got to be a pen tester, former hacker, or whatever to be a good BISO. But you got to understand the higher level conversations around security. So we see, NIST CSF up here, right? Yeah, that's what we really need to be able to understand. Familiarity with those frameworks that we typically work within, because you know what? As much as we might, malign those frameworks a bit because we hear so much about them, they are actually valuable and they do give us something. But you've also got to have that executive presence. As I said, I'm in talking to, regulatory boards, regulators, boards of directors. I couldn't go to happy hour last night because I had to do an executive committee call, right? You need somebody that can actually be there and communicate, but communicate in a meaningful way. Be able to speak to these concepts I started off with. How is what I'm doing within this particular division enabling this division? How is what I'm doing within this business line or within this particular, region, whatever it is, however you build, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But it's got to be somebody who's got that presence, who understands that, hey, this is how I have to communicate when I'm talking to a CEO or a CFO or I'm talking to the board, because they don't give two shits about what a WAF is. They don't care. No. So how am I helping them? What is the language they speak? Of course, to be a bridge, I have to be a bridge builder. I have to be somebody who's able to cooperate and communicate across aisles, draw people together that influence without authority. That's what we're looking for in a BISO. And then finally, I mentioned strategy. We've got to be strategic thinkers. If you're going to hire a BISO, we'll talk more about pitfalls in a moment, but you need somebody who can speak to a higher level strategy and not get so mired in the weeds that we lose sight of the bigger picture. That is what a BISO is here to do. So how do we win with the BISO? What does the BISO bring us? Well, first of all, the BISO is there to drive innovation. And what do I mean by drive innovation? I don't mean, we take care of risk management and that's going to make us innovate. Baloney. Innovation is going to happen regardless. So what do we do within security to help drive it? How do we establish processes, procedures, things that allow our developers to do what it is that they need to do in a more frictionless way? Now, some of you might be familiar, Netflix kind of really made this popular, the idea of the paved road, right? This is the idea where we meet them where they live. We use the tooling they're already using. We make the secure path the easy path for them to follow, right? Great, that sounds good, but how do we get one step better? How do we actually drive innovation? Give them the trust, accountability, and empowerment to pave their own road. Make it clear to them what's expected of them. Give them the tooling that empowers them to achieve those security objectives with a road that they've decided to pave on their own. If they want to create a detour, let's create that detour, but let's make sure it's safe. So our strategy has to focus on how do we do that? How do we enable them to pave their own road and make sure that it's not some dirt trail, but instead we're there and we've made it a smooth piece of asphalt. BISO is there to win you funding. Many organizations, mine included, if the business isn't buying into it, you're not getting the dollars to do it. When the BISO is there and can connect this idea of, hey, my initiative is generating new innovation or making greater innovation possible, it's opening up new revenue streams, that's gold if you're standing in front of the board or if you're standing there with your executive committee. You tell them, hey, we're going to launch this CASB solution, and that means we can take all of this stuff over here that because of regulations or other reasons we've stuck with on-prem, we're going to move it into the cloud, and we're going to be more agile in our product development. That's huge. They'll jump all over that. Now suddenly security is somebody they like. And what about that agility? When we can meaningfully enable the CI/CD pipeline, we can move our development along faster. Think about how much your developers love you. When you come to them with tools that easily automate, that don't hold them up. How about this? What do we do when we implement security in the pipeline? What do we think of? Quality gates? Anyone heard that? Oh, well, you got to this stage, you're doing a build. So now we're going to run this software composition analysis. We're going to run a SaaS tool. And when we find vulnerabilities, by the way, you're going to have to back up your pipeline, and you're going to have to go back and fix all that stuff. How does that go over for you? It doesn't. Because that breaks CI/CD. That breaks everything that we're doing. So what is our goal here as security people? We're trying to make that CI/CD run as fast as possible. Why? Because if I can have a fast, efficient, mature CI/CD, I don't have to break the build when I find, moderate level severity vulnerabilities. Yes, maybe the highest, most critical, SQL injection on a login page, that might still be problematic, and we're probably going to stop a build at that point. But a lot of those vulnerabilities, do I have to fix them right now and stop that deploy? Or can I simply rely on my super duper mature CI/CD pipeline that I've been a part of helping build, where I can now log that as a P0 issue in the backlog and know that the very next cycle is going to include the fix for that vulnerability? It exists in my production environment for maybe a few hours, maybe a day or two at most. And if we're really mature, we've got WAFs and other things in place that are helping to mitigate the risk in the meantime. That's how we can start to build that. And your BISO being a part of that, they get to speak to this every day because they're not up in some ivory tower CISO organization. They're down there with the business working on this daily. With that enablement comes the competitive advantage. I told you were going to see another magic quadrant. I'm sorry. There's two of them. But the reality is here we're all trying to get to that upper right. We want to be up there. We want to be those leaders. That's where we want to land. Security establishing itself as a competitive advantage. Coming to the market and saying, hey, demonstrating, not even just saying it in our marketing message, but actually demonstrating, unlike some major OS providers who I could name right now that you all know who I'm talking about anyway, who take months and months and months to release security updates, who in some cases manipulate the CVE database so that you can't see when it was actually reported. Ask me about that in private. I'll tell you who that is. if we actually demonstrate with a mature pipeline that we can bring security updates and fixes quickly, we can prioritize those reports we receive, that becomes an amazing tool in terms of brand goodwill, in terms of market position. We can leverage that. We are at that point that our users are hearing the stories every day in the media about ransomware and vulnerabilities and breaches and everything else. When we can use our agility to demonstrate that we're better than that, that's a powerful tool. That's becoming more powerful every day. We talked about this for years in information security, and it's never been a reality because at the end of the day, the users never really understood it. B2B markets, maybe it worked. But no, we're there now. The average consumer understands that security is important. They're out there preaching about how they're leaving Facebook because of privacy concerns. Make that something you can grab onto and make that your competitive advantage. And then improving profitability. As our pipelines become quicker, as we reduce vulnerabilities, we all know that story. It's the old push left story, right? Sooner we identify and fix a vulnerability in the pipeline, the less expensive it is for us. But it goes beyond that. How are we deploying security champions within our engineering teams, within our business teams perhaps, maybe even our SREs? Do we have architecture teams where we have security champions? People whose primary job is not security, but who have that awareness and can be a part of that process. Imagine how effective that can be. Does our threat modeling drive automation throughout the rest of the pipeline? Do we even do threat modeling? Yeah, you can do that in DevOps. I promise you. That's a whole different talk, but talk to me some other time about that one. This is how we do this. And the BISO is an integral part of making this happen because the BISO is aware of what's going on in the business. So what are the potential pitfalls? All right, Alyssa, this sounds great. We want to build a BISO program. We're gonna start instituting BISOs in our business lines. Things can go wrong. There are mistakes. This is a new role, relatively speaking. There are many organizations who are doing this. There are many organizations who aren't. And as such, with it being new, the industry is still trying to figure out, okay, what should a BISO do? How do we structure this? And I've seen it done in many different ways. Again, I've talked to a number of different BISOs who are at various levels and various organizational structures to find out how things were going. And this is what I've discovered are some of the strengths and weaknesses, some of the pitfalls, and some of the best practices. So let's talk pitfalls first. First one is reporting structure. Your BISO should not be reporting to your CISO. That's a deputy CISO. That's a different story. The BISO needs to be disconnected from the CISO organization because I mentioned before, I want the BISO going back and advocating on the part of the business. They need to be free to speak against what is going on in that organization. And we know about that whole idea of when our CISOs report into the wrong structure, when our CISO reports to the CIO, for instance, what that undue pressure can mean in their difficulty to bring the right story forward. And we go back and forth on that. We have, as long as I've been in this industry, about should the CISO report to the CIO or to the CRO or to the CEO. I mean, I'll vote for the CEO, but we're still trying to make that one happen. But that's the reality. Don't put your BISO under the CISO. That's not the point of this role. That is not where you want it to be, and it's going to limit their effectiveness. You also need to be very careful about how far down in the organization you put them. Yes, they need to be very good at influencing without authority, but if you bury them too deep in that structure, it makes it very difficult for them to influence across. And I've seen this happen. I could name a few organizations. I'm not into naming and shaming today, so we'll stay away from that. But that's the reality is, the BISOs I've talked to are in this position. This is what they tell me the most, is that they have a hard time getting a coordinated message across the business function. So elevate the CISO. My suggestion, selfishly, because this is what's working for me, and because this is what the bulk of the BISOs I talked to who really felt their reporting structure was strong, this is what they told me. It's got to be an executive reporting position at the level of a VP, or maybe you have directors that report direct to an exec. However that looks in your organization, but having that level of reporting structure, because that gives them that influence. They're still going to have to influence without authority. That's never going to change. They're going to be dealing with these peers on a daily basis and trying. I just had a conversation yesterday. I had to do this exact thing with one of my peers who runs our SRE team, trying to convince him that, hey, this is the route we need to go with how we're implementing our WAF. So that's going to happen. But give them a fighting chance. If I was 3 levels down in this, it would be a lot more difficult for me to have that conversation. Being a peer, it's a lot easier. That gives me some tools that I otherwise wouldn't have. Now, you can decide, should they report to the CTO, CIO, depending on how your organization's structured. For us, it works great as a CTO direct because it's a divisional CTO. And that brings me to my next point. Well, actually, it's not my next point. We'll get there in a minute. But the next thing is that tactical focus. This actually goes with the point before about having them vary too low in the organization. I've talked to BISOs whose direct reports or direct managers are asking them to write YAML, to be in there, reading through Terraform scripts. That's not what you're hiring a BISO to do. The BISO is there to lead that cybersecurity effort, not to be in the weeds writing YAML on behalf of your SREs and developers to make sure that security tooling gets involved. Leverage the people who know that stuff to do that. Get somebody in there who can be strategic. Because that's an easy way that you're going to fail. You wouldn't ask a CISO, unless maybe you're in a really small organization and that CISO just happens to be your entire security team. You're not going to ask them to go out there and manage, privileged access management across your cloud environment. So don't do that with your BISOs. And then there's this idea of lack of visibility. Make your BISO visible. Again, this is helping them with this idea of influencing when they don't have authority. How can you simply give them more visibility? When it comes to communicating security initiatives, instead of having that come from the divisional CTO or have that, feed that straight through from the security team, allow them to ingest that information and communicate it in a way that's meaningful to the division. Get them in front of your global risk committees, perhaps your boards of directors, when somebody's asking for that cybersecurity update from that business line. Make that a thing. Normalize that. Sure, it's great to get the cybersecurity picture, especially in a large organization, huge enterprise. We always think of the CISO going to the board and giving that message, but it can be far more meaningful when they're also getting updates from within the business lines about here's how the business sees our top risks, because they don't always match up to what the organizational CISO organization is going to say is the top risk for the company. Give them that visibility. Make sure they're seen. Make sure that the people within your business unit, your division, they know who to go to when it's something for security. They know who it is that can help them to bridge that gap and to advocate on their behalf when they're struggling working with the security team. That visibility is crucial to making this relationship work. So what are some best practices? They should be involved like any CISO would be in identifying those top risks, right? I bemoan the whole risk management conversation early on, but the reality is that is still a part of it. That doesn't go away. Sure, we're trying to be better and more a part of driving business innovation and enabling the business, all of those great things. But the reality is we can't get away from understanding what the top risks are. But those top risks should be done through the lens of what is most meaningful to my business. I look at S&P, and I can tell you point blank, my CISO organization, they're great. And they go and they give regular updates on the organization's top risks. When I go to my boards and I do the same, it's a very different story. Some of them match up. Ransomware, to my friends over here. Of course it's the number one right now. It's what everybody's thinking about. But then things start to change. When I call out insider threats, because it's more meaningful to my organization where we are responsible for a significant level of material non-public information about large enterprise organizations and sovereign nations, kind of important stuff. That maybe folks in like a market intelligence area, they're not so worried about that because all their stuff is public anyway. So that's important for us as BISOs to be involved in making that translation, drawing that correlation where it exists, but then also being able to demonstrate why something is a higher risk for our particular business line than maybe it is at the organizational level. So put your BISO in a position to be a part of these conversations. They should be working closely with your risk management teams. They should be working closely with your audit teams. How are we providing oversight here? How are we governing and making sure that we are addressing these top risks? And this all plays into where we're going to head. So the next thing is, in light of all this, have a vision, a mission, and some values. Now, I know these are one of those other things. You kind of look at it, and if you're like me, you've worked in large organizations for a long time, and you kind of like, oh, another vision statement, more mission. Oh, really? When these are done right, when they're done credibly, and by credible, I mean you actually take action that lives up to these, that's when they work. Now these here, I know they're really, really hard to read. I'll make the slides available later, but these are actually mine. And the thing here, and this is what I stress, is that idea of business enablement, aligning security strategy with the business objectives, enabling innovation. So you say that to them as a BISO. But now, when daily they see it, they see that you understand what it's like to be a developer, that you have empathy for them, that you consider their perspective and you know what they're trying to do and you know what the challenges are that they face from a product management team that's trying to drive constant change, constant improvements, constant new features. And you bring them something that helps them solve that. Now they start to believe in this. And so now when you take these things to the board, and you're going to say, hey, here's my vision, my mission, here's the values that I'm following. Yes, these are actually, as corny as it sounds, these are your guiding light. These are how you're going to achieve what it is that you're trying to do as a BISO, which then is going to build your roadmap. And that roadmap is important because this is part of that executive presence I'm talking about. If you can't stand there and put in front of your executive team, your business leaders, the story of here's where we're at, here's where I want to be, and here's how we're going to get there, you're going to fail. So this is why I say a BISO has got to have that executive presence. They've got to be able to put this out there, and they've got to be able to put it out there in terms that are meaningful to those audiences, but also, and this is the key, that speak to the motivations of that audience. My CFO, she just wants to know what's that going to cost me? How are we going to fit this into our budget? So you've got to be able to demonstrate how the things you're going to do are going to save money, how that's going to help fund, or where you're going to pull money from. Be able to speak about it in those terms when you're speaking to a CFO. COO wants to understand the processes and the procedures that you're going to put around this. How are we going to fit that into what we do today? How is that going to integrate with these various different standards and operating procedures that we use every day in our environment? That's what they want to hear about. Your BISO's got to be able to understand that and make those communications. But having that roadmap is how you do it. Because now you've connected all that crazy technical jargon and all that security stuff to the things that are going to be meaningful for them, and you've given them expectations. How many of you have implemented a WAF before? How does that go for you? Was that a quick 3-month turn it on and it worked, right? So don't, just like the vendor says, yeah, AWS says just turn on AWS WAF. You'll be safe and secure. Got stories for you there too. But no, seriously, if you put on here, hey, we're buying this WAF, and by the way, that's an initiative that extends for 3 years because we expect to install it, minimal blocking, and slowly tune it over time. Or we're going to roll it out to a pilot first, and we're going to slowly implement it, and in 3 years, we'll have it covering all of our applications. Now you've given them something meaningful. So I'm a huge proponent of having that roadmap and using that, again, to guide and to drive your narrative, your message, the thing that you want them to understand best about what it is that you're doing within that role. Regular updates. Regular updates. This goes back to that visibility. Leverage this opportunity to bring business context and security context in one conversation. There are very few people in your organization who are actually doing this. Think about it. What does your CISO do? Your CISO goes in there and they talk about what they're doing from a security perspective. They talk about business risk at a high level, but how good are most of your CISOs at talking about the specifics of each business line and how they're aligning those security objectives with what the business is doing? Most CISOs I know, especially in the large organizations, they don't have the time to be that intimately involved with every business unit to understand that, oh, this business unit is launched on this multi-cloud strategy, and they're building out this function as a service capability that then they're going to leverage to make everything active across this. Did you catch that mouthful? You don't hear that from a CISO very often, right? They might say multi-cloud. They might recognize some of the challenges, but if they don't understand what the multi-cloud means to that business line, what are they actually communicating to the board? So leverage the BISO in this perspective. When that BISO is part of your business reporting structure, they're in this day to day. Their job is as much to advocate on the part of the business as it is to advocate for security. It provides that important bridge. And so now when you get into these conversations at executive levels, it's not just about risk. It's not just this nebulous thing that's kind of ethereal, and yeah, we try to quantify it with all sorts of weird metrics and things, which is a great idea, but it doesn't really work so well. Now you can have a more meaningful discussion because now it's in the context of what they get. What are we doing to release our next product? What are we doing to add new functionality? How are we innovating? How are we driving competitive advantage? How are we moving ahead? That's the conversation the BISO should be having. And just telling the story of how security is a part of that, how security is enabling that, how security is making that better. Yes, the risk conversation has to happen too. And no, I'm not picking on you all over here that I looked at you when I said risk, I promise. I realize I keep doing it. Every time I say risk, I think it's you. I'm blaming you. See? I knew it. But no, the risk is important. That conversation still has to happen. But again, bringing that context is where it lands. That's when it hits home. That's when they see, finally, they have that aha moment of, oh, yeah, that's why we should be doing that. Or, that's a really cool thing. I'm glad you're doing that because now that all makes sense. And let me tell you, when you see that look on the face of your board members, when that aha clicks after you just said something, that is a wonderful feeling. Because so often we get used to, you're in there and everybody on the board's like this, cell phones in their hands, they're maybe paying attention. When they put that phone down because they heard you say that you're going to help them make an extra couple million this year, and now they're perked up and listening, you feel really good, and you know your message got through. Build a BISO community. This is something that's crucially important and is like one of the coolest things you can do with a BISO. So I've got BISOs. I've got BISOs in all my different divisions. They're all working with their business lines, and they're understanding the context, they're understanding the strategic objectives of what they're trying to do from a business perspective, and they're trying to grow that. They're all solving problems that are not necessarily unique to their division. Build that BISO community, and it becomes this circle where they are now sharing that information. They're working together across multiple divisions, so at a very technological level, they can talk about those problems. They can talk about what it is that they're experiencing, how their engineers are addressing it. This literally happened to me just 2 days ago. My engineers right now are building a solutions database. This is the coolest thing, by the way, because they totally went off and did this on their own and brought it to me. Speaking of driving innovation, they went off and said, hey, you know what, we're getting all these results from our SaaS tool. We want to be able to, and everybody's creating fixes for them. Why don't we share that across our engineering teams? And they built a solutions database. Literally, they go in, they take a finding, and it works kind of like Stack Exchange, where you can upvote and downvote and everything. So if somebody puts a solution in there, hey, I tried it, it didn't work, the vulnerability didn't go away, but I updated, here's the new one. That's not something I want to keep just to my division. We just had a conversation yesterday in a roundtable about how we're going to expand that across our entire organization. Think about how effective that is. Would those same conversations happen without a community like that? If you don't have that interaction across your business lines, if you've got this business line and their engineering team doing one thing, this business line and their engineering team doing another, how often do those conversations actually happen? So you can use this community to better build your security strategies across all the divisions. Now you see this other thing I got sitting over here. I've got the information security organization, right? Big arrow. What about that information security organization? When I've got that community of BISOs and they're working together, they're understanding cohesively how they can work together, now when there's something they need to influence information security, it's not just one person standing up and saying, hey, this is wrong, or this isn't going to work for us, or we need to address this in a different way. Now you've got a collaborative team of people who can stand up and give perspective from across the organization and say, hey, from a business, this just doesn't make sense. This is what we're doing. This is how we're all working together. This is how we're making it better. We need you, security, to get on board with this approach instead. Let's talk about a solution that addresses these needs. And that is probably the strongest value I've seen from the BISO community that we've created at S&P. We have regular updates every week where we're meeting with our security team. And I hate to say this, because this is the type of dysfunction that does happen in large organizations. It's no longer the security team pitting one division against the other, because we're all at the table. We're all there together at the same time with the same story. And that can be a huge benefit when we talk about how do we align our security team with our business. So, with that, I want to invite all of you to continue the conversation. My social media information is up here. I also did put in somebody made the suggestion, and I figured, what the heck, I did put into the Whova app. I'll be out in the hallway after this. If you've got questions, we can talk about this. You can basically ask me anything. I'll hang out in the hallway here for at least a little while to chat with folks, as long as you all want to talk. If you got questions, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, again, reach out to me. Twitter is by far the easiest. Those that know me on Twitter know that I'm probably way more active there than I should be. But LinkedIn works too. I just don't check it as often. And then my website's up there too if you're interested in that. I do have my blog out there, some other things. And then finally, just big, great big thank you. Thank you to all of you for being here, for being with us virtually. This is truly exciting to have a hybrid event like this where we're back in person. So as you go through the rest of this day, you're going to hear some awesome talks about risk. You're going to hear some awesome talks about threats and how we integrate that into that intelligence into our space. And I'm pointing at Samara up here, and she's going to be your keynote this afternoon. So be sure to check that out. 3 o'clock, 3:30. That's right. We're on the half hours. So there's a lot of great stuff coming at you. Enjoy it, but keep in mind, as you go through all of this, how are you going to take that Camry and turn it into something maybe a little more fun to drive, like that Mustang or that Beamer? Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.